Could the Blue Jackets add another WHL defenseman success story to their pool? We're going to talk about that on today's Locked On Blue Jackets.
Your Locked On Blue Jackets, your daily podcast on the Columbus Blue Jackets. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello and welcome to Locked On Blue Jackets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I am, as always, your host, Jay Foster, here to give you the good, the bad, and the ugly about your favorite team, and mine, the Columbus Blue Jackets. Before we get started, I want to thank everyone for making this your first listen of the day every single day. Locked On Blue Jackets is free and available on all podcast platforms and over on YouTube. I also have to let you know that today's episode is brought to you by Indeed. They know when you're growing your own business, you have to make every dollar count. That's why with Indeed, you only pay for quality applications that match your must-have job requirements. Visit Indeed.com/lockedon to start hiring now. Terms and conditions apply. Today, we're doing another prospect profile, another bonus episode for all of you. And today, I've got Derek Neumeier back from McKeen's Hockey. And yesterday, we had a really great conversation about TJ Ginla and whether he could be a fit for the Blue Jackets. And today, we're taking a look at a defenseman coming out of the WHL, and that is Carter Yakemchuk. Obviously, the Blue Jackets have a decent amount of WHL-ready or WHL alumni defensemen in their pool. Could Yakemchuk be another one? I'm just going to get right into my conversation with Derek because he is much smarter than I am and says things much better than I could. I feel like there's one of maybe 12, there's like 12 defensemen that I feel like are kind of in the Blue Jackets wheelhouse in the draft this season, and no one ever really seems to know definitively who the best one is. But a guy that I am hearing more and more about kind of as we get closer to the draft is a guy called Carter Yakemchuk, who is playing out in the WHL for the Calgary Hitmen this season. And I've got Derek Neumeier of McKeen's Hockey back to talk a little bit about him. Because like I said, this is a guy that, obviously he's probably not as flashy or impressive as, the Levshinovs or the Zane Parek's. But I think he's still a really interesting prospect to look at. So like what's his kind of what's the scouting report on Yakemchuk?
I mean, I would say that Yakemchuk can be just as flashy as some of those guys, if not more so. I mean, his highlight reel from this season is probably pound for pound just as good as almost anyone's. He's a very dynamic offensive defenseman. I mean, he scored 30 goals this year in the WHL, scored at a point per game pace. You might not think that he's got so much skill because he's 6'2" and he's not afraid to play very physical. He ended the season with more than 100 penalty minutes, but his hands are exceptional. He's got a great feel for the offensive zone. He has a very sharp attack mentality with the way he, approaches the offensive side of the game. He's very incisive with the way he's able to carve through defensemen. He's very aggressive but also controlled at times with how he picks his spots in the offensive zone. He scores a lot of goals in and around the offensive net just because he's always looking for those opportunities and he usually finds them. And even when opposing defenses get close to him to try and shut him down, he can beat them one-on-one and getting close to the net just by, forcing as well. But he's also a very well-rounded defenseman. There's still issues with his skating and his mobility, sometimes with the decision-making. But this is a guy who isn't afraid to defend and defend hard. He's not afraid to play physical. He's not the type of guy that you want to get in battles with in the boards or around the net because he will inflict some punishment, and he's pretty good at boxing you out or pinning you to the boards. And teams in the NHL, they love toolsy right-shot defensemen like him. I mean, David Reinbacher went 6th overall last year to Montreal, which was a shock to some people. But you've got a defenseman who could, be playing 20 minutes a night in the NHL in all situations. Like, that's very, very valuable. If those kind of players hit, it's just such a huge advantage to have them. And Yakemchuk, while he's still kind of raw, especially coming from a team that really struggled this year and played without a lot of structure, just when you look at the raw tools that he has and just the overall pure upside, he's a very, very intriguing player.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was wondering. Is obviously Calgary didn't make the playoffs for the WHL this year. Is that like, because I feel like we're hearing all about, like I mentioned a couple of guys earlier, and then, you've got Sam Dickinson, you've got Steve Boehm, you've got like 100 defensemen, it feels like, and everyone's got a different opinion on which one's the best one. But is it that Yakemchuk just isn't getting as many kind of accolades just because his team didn't make the playoffs? Like it's tough to be a good player on a bad team, I feel like.
It's been good and bad for him. It's bad in the sense that Calgary's not in the playoffs, so he's not getting playoff hockey, which obviously sucks for him, sucks for scouts who'd like to see him. And it's, he's not getting the same advantage in his development that some other guys are. Like if Sam Dickinson and the London Knights go all the way to the OHL final this year, which they certainly could do, that's great experience that he's going to be getting, and that's going to be experience he can use moving forward. But with Yakemchuk, it's kind of funny because Calgary was so bad and didn't have a very deep and talented team. He got to play a lot, and he got a green light that just basically never went red. There were so many situations where you could see that the teams, basically their entire strategy was give Yakemchuk the puck and just let him do something magical. And most of the time it actually worked. I couldn't even begin to count the number of games I saw because I live in Calgary. So Yakemchuk has been in my backyard, the last 3 seasons. I can't even count the number of times where the Hitmen have been down a goal or 2 goals, or, they're starting to lag and they just need a big play and they just give the puck to Yakemchuk and he just does it all himself. Goes end to end or goes from the offensive blue line into the net or in towards the net and scores. Like just his situation, because he was kind of a man on an island, he just got so many opportunities to grow his game, and that was actually really good for him. It's going to be very interesting to see what happens with him moving forward because the Hitmen play such an unstructured style. Like the things that he's good at now, he's not going to be able to do them in the NHL. He's going to have to play in a lot more of a system-focused environment. He's going to have to be a lot more restrained with the risks he takes. And he's not going to be the guy who has the puck on his stick for 90% of the game. So there's going to be some ways they'll have to adjust. But I'm a believer in Yakemchuk. I think he can do it. Just the resolve he showed this year, because no matter how bad the team got, he was always there battling. He was always trying to make something happen. Like right down to the last minutes of the last games, he was there, just being as good as he was all season. So I think that's very, very telling about his character and about his ability to, keep working and improving his game, and just kind of shows how much he really wants to be a player.
Going to get back to my conversation with Derek about Yakemchuk in just a second. First, though, I've got to tell you about Policygenius. Life insurance is a really important and necessary safety net for your family, but trying to find the right policy on your own can be so time-consuming, overwhelming, confusing. Policygenius is the country's leading online insurance marketplace. Saves you time and money so you can provide your family with a financial safety net starting today. With Policygenius, you can find life insurance policies that start at just $292 a year for $1 million of coverage. Some options even offer same-day approval and that you can avoid unnecessary medical exams. Policygenius helps you compare your options from top companies, and their team of licensed experts is on hand to help talk you through it. You can talk to a team of award-winning agents who are going to walk you through the process step by step, saving you time and money. Your work life insurance policy may not offer enough protection for your family's needs, and even worse, if you leave your job, it might not come with you. Policygenius is going to give you unbiased advice from a licensed expert support team. They've got no incentive to recommend one insurer over another, so you know that you can trust their guidance. And if that's not enough, they've got thousands of 5-star reviews on Google and Trustpilot from customers who found the best fit for their needs from Policygenius. Check life insurance off your to-do list in no time with Policygenius. Head to policygenius.com/locked.nhl or click the link in the description to get your free life insurance quote and see how much you could save. Once again, that is policygenius.com/locked-on-NHL. So do you feel like kind of obviously if there's going to be translatability issues, I don't know if translatability is a word, but we're going to go with it. If there's issues with kind of translating his game to the NHL, do you see him as kind of more of a project for an NHL team, a guy that kind of almost definitely goes back to Calgary this year, maybe for another year, maybe, stays there until he's 20 and then jumps probably to the AHL, to the NHL? Is he a guy that you think probably has a slightly more sedate development path than some of the other defensemen that are kind of in the same conversation this draft.
Yeah, I think that would be very important for him. Like I'm a big supporter of his, but I truly believe that the best thing for him is going to be lots of time, just because he plays a bit of a cowboy style right now. It's entertaining to watch at the junior level, but it's just not how hockey is played in the NHL. And it's going to be good for him to come back to the WHL and hopefully make the playoffs, hopefully get more of that kind of opportunity. He'll probably be on Hockey Canada's radar for the World Juniors next winter. So there are things that he'll be able to access by going back to junior, which would be good for his development. But yeah, like don't get me wrong. I think Yakemchuk's overall potential is very, very high. I think his ceiling is very, very high. I mean, you have a defenseman who is living as a number one defenseman right now. And he's been the number one defenseman for the Hitmen going back to last season. And he just, he embodies that. He embraces that role. And I think there's a chance that he could be a number one in the NHL as well. More likely, he probably comes in at number 2, maybe a number 3. But I think there is that potential for a number 1 upside out of him. But it's not going to happen just by throwing him in the NHL at 19 and just letting him develop there. I think you're going to have to take your time with him, really be careful and hands-on with his development, kind of help him along in the areas of his game that need fixing, but still also encourage him to, lean on his strengths. With some players, you can slot them in the NHL right away, and they're just so good and already so polished, they're going to figure it out. Like Celebrini is going to be in the NHL next year. At this point, there's nothing left for him to prove at the college level. But with Yakemchuk, just the way his game is now, it definitely needs some polish, and that's okay. I mean, you have a ton of great players in the NHL now who stayed throughout their usual junior eligibility, did a year or 2 in the AHL, and then eventually became some of the best players in the league. It's not a detriment. It's not a punishment. But just with some players, you can just tell they just might need a little bit more of that time. And I would say that Yakemchuk is one of those guys.
Yeah, for sure. Obviously, the Blue Jackets have been kind of in the lottery conversation for I think it's their 3rd season where they're going to be in the lottery conversation, or maybe their 4th. But so I'm kind of new to looking at prospects in greater detail, let's say. And one of the things that I kind of found really interesting when I learned was the idea of what a successful first-round pick is. And I think a lot of people think that if you're going to be a first-round pick, you should be NHL ready basically immediately, and that's just not how prospects work. Some of them are. Some of them it takes time. Like you said, some of them they play in the CHL until they're 20. They go to the AHL for 2 years. They make their NHL debut at 22, and then they just take off. Some guys are ready at 18. Some guys aren't. And I think there's, like you said, there's nothing wrong with that. And I think Yakemchuk is going to be a really interesting prospect to watch. Like you said, what does he do next year when he goes back to Calgary? What does he do when Calgary's season finishes next spring? Like it's going to be really interesting. I think
it's also important to mention and for people to keep in mind that just because a player could play in the NHL at 18 or 19 doesn't necessarily mean it's the best thing for their development. Yeah, you got a lot of guys at 18 or 19, they could play on the 4th line, play 10 minutes a night, and, maybe they're just okay. Maybe they're keeping their head above water, scoring a couple points here or there, but they're not really thriving. They're not really growing their game. Like just because a player can do that, it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be the best thing for them long term. You want guys who are able to get that growth that they need in their games, to work on things, to develop physically, to build some confidence, to learn how to handle pressure. You get all these opportunities to learn these things by sticking it out a little bit longer in junior or in college or sometimes in Europe. But it doesn't always work. You don't always get those things if you join the NHL too soon, especially if you get stuck in like a bottom 6 role. You're not getting power play time. Maybe you're not getting to play a lot of offensive minutes. It's kind of hard to grow your offensive game at that point. And every player at 18 or 19, they still have room that they can grow their offensive game. So with Celebrini, like he's probably going to come right into a top 6 role wherever he ends up. So he's going to be getting opportunities. He's going to be getting ice time. That's a different story. But if you're bringing a player in just to kind of have them around, just as kind of like a depth forward or something like that, that's not good. You want the players to be in a situation where they're able to thrive and grow.
Yeah. And we've kind of seen that with David Juracek this year in Columbus, which, you know, I have been fairly vocal about his development this season and how it was handled, and how he's either been called up and in the press box, or, you know, been ping-ponging back and forth. And I know a lot of Blue Jackets fans have been frustrated with Denton Mateychuk, who we're going to talk about in a little bit more detail in a second there. Not frustrated with him, but like, a lot of people watched him in preseason, the start of this season, and kind of he got that, like, I don't know if he got the full 9 games, but he played I think some preseason games, but I don't think he made his NHL debut in October this year, and then got sent back to the WHL, where he's been phenomenal for Moose Jaw. But a lot of people were like, he's good enough to play in the NHL right now. Why isn't he? Why are they sending him back? And I think, based on what we've seen with the handling of Juracek this season and the handling of some of the other younger defensemen in the organization, I think I am happy that they sent Mateychuk back to Moose Jaw. I think it was the best thing they could have done for him.
It was, yeah.
Look at what he's done this season for Moose Jaw.
Yeah, his game has taken some really nice steps this year. I mean, he was good last year, and I don't want to take that away from him, but his game has gotten better. There has definitely been growth that's been noticeable. And I don't know if that same amount of growth, that same amount of improvement would have happened if he was getting swallowed up alive on the third pair for Columbus this year, especially because
Blue Jackets team. It goes back to, do you want to play third pairing minutes on a miserable NHL team, or do you want to be the guy on a team like Moose Jaw, which I believe they were the second or third seed in their conference. They swept their first round opponent, and they are getting set to start the second round. And again, Mateychuk had 7 points in 4 games. He had a kind of a slow start, I feel like, and then kind of just took off the past couple of games for Moose Jaw in the playoffs. And like, he's still playing meaningful hockey right now, which he wouldn't be if he was on Columbus.
Yeah. And Moose Jaw's got a very good chance at winning the WHL title. And if they do that, they'd go on to the Memorial Cup, which would be a great experience for him if he's able to get it. And this season, Mateychuk has really gotten the chance to learn how to be one of the best defensemen in the league. You know, he's gotten to have those expectations on him, to have that pressure, and to kind of embrace that role. And he's done a very good job at it. But that's what you want to see, right? This guy was a high pick by the Blue Jackets. They want him to be one of the best defensemen in the NHL one day. Him being one of the best defensemen in the WHL, that's great practice for that down the road.
Yeah, 100%. Going to finish up my conversation with Derek about Yakemchuk in a minute, and we're also going to talk a little bit about Denton Mateychuk and the season that he's having. First, though, I've got to tell you all about Indeed, because when you're drafting your fantasy team, do you ever wish that you could just handpick the best stars for your business team as well? If you're building your talent roster, you need Indeed. It's the hiring platform where you can attract, interview, and hire all in one place. You don't need to spend hours on multiple different job sites looking for candidates with the right skills. Indeed has everything all in one place. They've got a ton of great tools like Instant Match. They've got online assessments, virtual interviews, and over 80% of Indeed employers find quality candidates whose resume on Indeed matches their job description the moment they sponsor a job. So you don't have to sit around waiting for people that are qualified to apply. Indeed knows when you're growing your own business, you have to make every single dollar count. That's why with Indeed, you only pay for quality applications that match your must-have job requirements. Visit Indeed.com/lockedon to start hiring now. Once again, Indeed.com/lockedon. Terms and conditions apply. Cost per application pricing isn't available for everyone. Need to hire? You need Indeed. I was left to know about Factor. Eat stress-free this spring with Factor's delicious, ready-to-eat meals. Every fresh, never-frozen meal is chef-crafted, dietitian-approved, and ready to eat in just 2 minutes. If you are a gremlin like me that exists mostly on, like, cereal and almonds at 10 p.m., Factor is the thing for you. You can choose from a weekly meal of 35 different options. They've got calorie-smart options, keto options, veggie and vegan options, and they've got over 60 add-ons like breakfast, on-the-go lunch, snacks, and beverages to help you stay fueled and feel good all day long. You can get dinner on the table in just 2 minutes. And if you're looking for something that's a little fancier, they've got a premium option. They've got things like filet mignon, they've got shrimp, truffle butter, broccolini, and asparagus. That sounds good as heck. They've got no fuss, no mess meals. Factor eliminates the hassle of prepping, cooking, or cleaning up. You can just heat it up in the microwave and savor the good stuff. Literally 2 minutes, dinner is on the table. It's great. Head to factormeals.com/LockedOnNHL50 and use code LockedOnNHL50 to get 50% off your first box plus 20% off your next box as well. It's code LockedOnNHL50 at factormeals.com/LockedOnNHL50. 50% off your first box plus 20% off your next box while your subscription is active. So let's kind of talk about. We're gonna finish off here with just a little bit of a little bit more Mateychuk talk, because that was one of the things I like. He's one of those guys that I don't get to watch a lot of because time zones exist, and he plays a lot of his games at like 3 a.m. my time usually. So I don't get to watch a lot of him live. But every time I do get to watch him, or I see highlight reel or a video on Twitter or whatever, I'm like, man, so excited for this guy to be in Columbus. Hopefully, Moose Jaw does have a deep playoff run. They go to the Memorial Cup. Hopefully, we don't see Mateychuk in Cleveland this season, although he could definitely help the Monsters playoff run at the rate players are getting injured right now. He shows up to training camp in October. Is he a guy that you think should be in the top 6 for Columbus defensemen, or is he a guy that you think could maybe benefit from a year in the AHL?
I would say he's on the fence, honestly. There's very good traits to his game. He's very sharp, especially in the offensive zone. Very, very dangerous with the puck. Excellent power play quarterback. And his skating is quite good as well. So there's definitely a lot of upside to the way he plays. I think he's going to be a 50, maybe 60-point defenseman in the NHL at his peak, which is very, very good. I would say that he's still maybe a little bit underdeveloped physically. He's never going to be like a big bruiser. He's never going to be like a Yurachek type of physique and use his body the same way that someone like that does. But it's hard to play defense. You're going to get hit a lot, especially from forecheckers. You're going to really need to be explosive in your skating to escape pressure on breakouts, especially if you want to carry it yourself. So with Mateychuk, I still feel like he could use a little bit more time with his strength and conditioning. He still seems a little skinny. There are times where you see him engaged in 50-50 battles along the wall or around the net. And he's not bad. He's certainly competitive in them. But there are times where he gets pushed around a little bit, where he's just not quite able to match some of the bigger competition that you see, even at the WHL level. And that's never going to be his game. But it can be a problem for young defensemen in the NHL level. If you're trying to defend against a guy who's 6'4" and 210 pounds, like, he's going to eat your lunch. He's going to crush you into the boards. You're going to take a lot of punishment, and that can, lead to injury risks, or even just, it's not necessarily a good situation for a defenseman if he's getting scored on all the time. Or if you've got a team that's at least early in the season trying to win every game, if you're out there in the first period and you're on the ice for 2 goals against, you're probably going to be on the bench. You're probably not going to be getting a lot of ice time. Is the best thing for Mateychuk to be in the NHL next year, where he's maybe only getting 12 or 13 minutes a night, taking a lot of physical punishment? Maybe not, but it would depend on what their situation is. If they can give him power play time, if you can maybe get him on the second pair, give him like a veteran partner, and maybe they can shelter him a little bit. The situation the player plays in is so important. Like, I could certainly see an ideal situation next year where Mateychuk is on the team and he's thriving. He's putting up a lot of points. He's getting ice time. Like, those are things that can happen. But I think Columbus would need to be very careful with how they would use him. They would want to make sure that he's in a situation that's conducive to his game, where he's able to play to his strengths and he's able to get the ice time and the experience that he needs, because he's still at a very pivotal point in his career and in his development.
Yeah, and Columbus is such a weird team right now because, like, I have no idea, barring, like, Werenski, Damon Severson, and Eric Branson, I have no idea who the other 3 top 6 defensemen are going to be for this team next season. Is Jiricek going to be on the team? Maybe. I'd like to think so. Ivan Provorov might go. Adam Boquist might not be there. Jake Bean might not be there, which will be a shame because I like Jake Bean a lot. I think he's been a really good player this season for the Blue Jackets. But there's so much upheaval in Columbus right now. New GM is coming in. There might be a new coach come October. It's going to be... I genuinely couldn't tell you who the top 6 defensemen could be for the Blue Jackets next year. Denton Mateychuk wouldn't surprise me if he plays an entire season in the AHL. It also wouldn't surprise me if he plays in the top 4 and thrives. So it's going to be really interesting. I'm excited to watch more of his playoff run with Moose Jaw, and whether he gets into some games with Cleveland or not, I'll be definitely watching those as well. But I've got a good one with Mateychuk, I think.
And
I'm
if
a believer in Mateychuk.
And if he ends up in Cleveland next year to start the year, or even for the full year, that's not a bad thing. His game is still going to be making a lot of progress. He's definitely, if he was in Cleveland, be playing a lot of minutes, maybe even quarterbacking their top power play. It'd be a good situation for him. He'd still be able to play his game. He'd still be growing. He'd still be developing. And then he would just be that much more ready for the NHL in the season after, especially if Columbus does come back with a lot of these defensemen. I mean, you mentioned Bean and Boquist. These guys still have more of their game that they can prove. I don't think they're done developing themselves. I think they're going to be better than what we've seen this year. Jiricek's another great example. He's a guy who should be in the NHL and should be playing minutes in the NHL too, right? So you've got these other young defensemen.
My biggest problem all year has been, and we don't need to get into it right now, but
sure.
David Jiricek is averaging, I think, about 13 minutes of ice time a game, and he's played in 30 games for the Blue Jackets this season. And to me, neither of those numbers are high enough. But here we are, the end of the season. This is what's happening. But then, there's other guys in the system as well. Jake Christensen, I think, is a guy that could potentially challenge for a spot next season. I don't think Stanislav Svozil is going to challenge for a spot, but he's a guy in the system that I am really, really high on. I like Svozil's game a lot.
I'm a fan too.
Nick Blankenberg's another guy. Came in as a college free agent and has looked like a top 4 NHL defenseman every time he's there, and keeps getting bounced around because they have too many dang defensemen right now. So it's going to be, he's got a lot of guys to jump over in the queue, but I'm really excited to see what happens with Mateychuk.
Yeah.
If people want some more kind of information on Carter Yakemchuk, perhaps, or other WHL prospects, we didn't really get a chance to talk about guys like Berkeley Catton or Caden Lindstrom. But where can people find you and your work online?
Twitter, or X, if you will, is basically the hub that I use for all of it. So my handle is Derek_N_NHL. But there, you can find my written content on our McKeen's website. You can find some of my appearances on podcasts or radio stations or other media appearances like this one. We've got a YouTube channel at McKeen's, so we're trying to branch more into that side of things as well. So if you follow me, you'll certainly be getting a lot of different prospect-related content. It's just going to come from different avenues and mediums. So that's why I like to use that as the hub.
And that's all I've got for today. Tomorrow we're going to do a preview episode for the Predators game tomorrow night, so keep an eye out for that. Hopefully it is less of a disaster than the Panthers game. And I've been Jay Foster. You can find me on Twitter at _Jacob Foster, JKOBFORSTER. You can find the show on Instagram and on Twitter over at LO_Blue Jackets. Thank you for making us your first listen of the day every single day. We are free and available on all podcast platforms over on YouTube and on SiriusXM. If you have comments, questions, criticisms, please email me at lockedonbluejackets@gmail.com. And until tomorrow, make sure you stay locked on.